Another chaplain at this university was the inimitable Dr. Tommy Tyson, who was really the thinking man's charismatic. Dr. Tyson, I received the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I was a lost, confused, disoriented, and suicidally depressed Methodist preacher in the early 1970s. In 1975, the charismatic renewal movement hit the traditional denominations like a tsunami. And I was one of those that was on the beach when it hit. And I was caught up in an experience for which I had no framework. I had no theology, no functional vocabulary, no cultural background. I literally had experienced something that I couldn't explain. Now, I have to tell you everybody has his own hermeneutic, and because mine is mine, it makes it valid. But I believe basically that is one explanation of the New Testament. That the New Testament did not create the upper room created the New Testament. And that the New Testament is a colloquy of people who are trying to explain what had already happened to them. And that's where I was in 1975. And I literally was trying to figure out what that meant in my life. And I struggled. I found voices that claimed to represent the charismatic renewal movement. They were not voices I identified with easily. There were things about it I liked, but I couldn't find a place. And then I heard Dr. Tommy Tyson, who had been an early chaplain here at Oral Roberts University. And he gave me permission to, in the way he spoke. I sensed in him permission to have my spirit enlivened by God's Spirit and have my mind and my intellect engaged. And I felt that it was not necessary to enter the charismatic renewal movement by checking your brain at the door. And it was a revelation to me. He was an eccentric person personally, and had a remarkable and unforgettable laugh. He was an extremely healthy person, and he had one of those whiskey laughs. So once I told him I was struggling with a certain thing I couldn't understand to be the will of God. I said, I think this is what God's telling me to do, and I don't want to do it. And he regarded me the way he would cock his head to the side like a puppy, and he put his hands out on his rotund tummy, and he laughed, and he said, he said, little buddy. He always said that to me. He said, and I would appreciate it, actually, if none of you would use that. It's a phrase which I was willing to let Dr. Tyson get away with. Put his hands out on his tummy, and he said, little buddy, he said, you're lying. I said, what? Dr. Tyson? He said, no. He said, it's not an evil lie. It's just a lie. He said, you're lying to yourself. You're lying to me. You're lying to everybody that'll listen. He said, you want to listen. You want to do this so bad you can taste it. But you're telling me you don't want to do it. I said, okay, if I'm doing that, and I think probably you're right. Why am I doing that? He said, because you're like all the rest of us. You think that that the will of God is like medicine. Unless it tastes bad, it isn't doing you any good. Well, I just want to say he influenced my life. Dr. Jack Gray, who's also gone to be with heaven, taught me the vivacity and joy of people. I've never known anybody who loved people like Jack Gray, who wrote 50 thank you notes every morning of his life before 9 o'clock in the morning. I said, Jack, I can't think of 50 people I need to thank for anything. He said, make stuff up. He said, you send somebody a thank you note and they will think they did something nice for you. And he was, his innate joie de vivre was infectious. I just wanted to be around him. He made me joyful. I want to be a joyful person who gives others joy. I want to be a thoughtful person who who can inspire others to think in the power of the Holy Spirit. And then Dr. Paul Walker, who is still alive, thanks be to God. Dr. Walker was the senior pastor at Mount Perrin Church of God, where I was with him there for some time, and then went on to be the general overseer of the Church of God, Cleveland. I never was in that denomination. I worked with him at Mount Perrin while I was still a Methodist, actually. Dr. Walker felt no matter what uniform you wore, it was still baseball. And a great kingdom thinker, and Dr. Walker influenced me for leadership. I came as a missionary, came straight out of Africa and into the largest Pentecostal church east of the Mississippi, 9,200 members at that time. And he was like Potiphar. He withheld nothing from me. He took me at his right hand into board meetings, and I saw high-octane, high-velocity, multi-level leadership at an intimate level. And it was an eye-opening experience. It was a revelation. And it inspired me, his influence inspired me to want to be a leader. Jimmy Buskirk made me know that God had a plan for my life. And that eventually all roads lead to ORU. Dr. Tyson told me that it was not necessary to put your intellect in neutral in order for your spirit to be engaged. And indeed, it was dangerous. Dr. Jack Gray taught me the joy of loving people, and of loving people whether they love you or not, or whether they deserve it or not. And it was something that has impacted my life. I love folks. And Dr. Walker taught me that leadership of influence is an important commodity in the university and in the kingdom, and must be stewarded with great humility and with great diligence. Now, having said all of that, you see the factors that have influenced my life. Whether they have done so as thoroughly as they needed to do or not, the future will tell us. What I will say to you is this: I'm indubitably not the wisest or most creative or most intelligent or best educated university president in America, and may not be even the best one that you've ever had here or ever will have. I will tell you this: I'm going to believe that the influence of Christ upon my life, and that those voices whom he in his great mercy raised up to speak into my life, will flow through me to the students. Our product here is not really buildings. It's not really straightening up the deferred maintenance, which has to be done and is being done. It's not really the board, as great as this board is. I was inspired by this board of trustees. I couldn't believe that they had only been constituted a year earlier. They worked together as seasoned professionals, thoughtful and caring for the university. But the board is not the outcome. The buildings are not the outcome. Our graduates, who will be world changers, who have lived and learned and the influence of an ambiance like this one, that's the product. And I'll never forget it. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us that time to just share. Hopefully that answered some of the questions that you would have asked. So I'm going to ask Dr. Rutland to come on, Billy, come up here, Dr. Fagan, and I think Dave Ellsworth is going to join me up here. And so you're going to rearrange the furniture. All right. So, but we got mics here. If you don't mind coming forward and asking your questions, you'll have all representatives of the college here, or there's some others here that if you want to ask them. So, yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Sure. Just pass it.